Hello and welcome. Yes, welcome again. Welcome to a new class. Class number 111. Yes, sir, 111, which comes after class 110, and it comes before class 112. So, por lo tanto, it falls between class 110 and class 112. All right, are you ready? Let's go. Past tense. I was, I am here, I'm here, in front of you. I was here yesterday, and I'll be here tomorrow. I was here yesterday, I'm here now, and I'll be here tomorrow. All right, very easy. You were here yesterday, you're here today, now, and you'll be here tomorrow. Yesterday I was, now I am, tomorrow I'll be. Yesterday you were, today you are, and tomorrow you will be. Sin hacer contracciones ahora. Yes, I wasn't here 2 years ago. And you weren't here 2 years ago. All right, vamos por partes. The past tense. I was has four meanings. Four possibilities in Spanish. Yo era más joven hace 2 años. I was younger 2 years ago. True. All right. Yo era. Yo fui. Fui un buen estudiante en la escuela primaria. I was a good student in primary school. I was. Estuve aquí ayer. I was here yesterday. Y por último, estaba. Yo estaba aquí cuando empezó el programa. I was here when the program started. So there are 4 ways. Yo fui, yo era, yo estuve, yo estaba. All right, and you, okay? Hace 2 años eras más joven. 2 years ago you were younger. Now you're older. 2 years ago you were younger. Creo que sí, ¿no? En mi caso sí. 2 years ago I was younger. I'm not immortal for the moment. I haven't found the key to immortality yet. Pero si me hago inmortal, vamos a tener clases de inglés hasta el infinito. So, yes. So, estuviste aquí ayer. You were here yesterday. Eres más joven ayer. You were younger. You were younger yesterday. Fuiste buen estudiante en la escuela primaria. Were you a good student in primary school? ¿Estabas aquí ayer cuando mencioné lo de Colorado? Were you here yesterday when I mentioned Colorado, the state in the United States? So, I was. She was. He was. You were. They were. We were. Pronunciation. Was, simple, es sencillo. I was. John Kennedy was the President of the United States in 1961. Ronald Reagan was the President in 1983. Was. You were. You were here yesterday. You were here the day before yesterday. You were here last week. You were. Was, were. It's very easy. I repeat, 4 different possibilities in Spanish, but only 1 in English. Well, 2 versions of 1 in English, was and were. Napoleon was French. He was from Corsica. Winston Churchill was English. He was from England. John Kennedy was American. He was from Massachusetts. Abraham Lincoln was American. He was from Kentucky and Illinois. My father was American. He was from Texas. etc. Was and were. Pronunciation, were. You were. They were. We were. Were. The British, more or less, you were. I was, you were. They were, we were. Were. Of course, los americanos, que la area americana. Okay, yes. Pero los británicos también tienen, según la fonética, la R americana también. We were. All right. Past it, negative. I wasn't. I wasn't here in this room 2 years ago. I wasn't a member of the Republican Party last year. I wasn't an English teacher 50 years ago. Parece que sí, pero no. I wasn't an English teacher. I wasn't. Was not. Was not. Contraction, wasn't. You weren't. You weren't my student 5 years ago. Weren't. Contraction, were not. Listen to the pronunciation. Weren't. 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 The British, weren't. Common denominator, one syllable. One syllable. No digas weren't. Weren't. You weren't. No, you weren't. Weren't. Rima con quemar, burn. Weren't burnt. Weren't burnt. Es un sonido más oscuro, tanto en sonido inglés como americano. Weren't, weren't. You weren't, weren't. One syllable. And then in the interrogative, was I here yesterday? Was Michael Johnson a good basketball player last year? Was Luigi Barghini born in Italy? Yes, he was. Were you my student yesterday? Were you Spanish 10 years ago? Were you in this room yesterday? I was. Were you? I was. Were you? All right, was. What nationality am I? I'm American. What nationality are you? You're Spanish. What nationality is Marta? She's Sevillana. She's Spanish. Was she in Seville yesterday? Marta, were you? Marta, were you in Seville yesterday? You weren't. She wasn't. Ask me if she was here yesterday. Richard, yes. Was Marta here yesterday? I don't remember. Marta, were you here yesterday? You were. Yes, she was. She was. Ask me if she was a beauty queen, Reina de Belleza. Ask me if she was a beauty queen when she was 18 years old. Richard, yes. Was Marta a beauty queen when she was 18 years old? I don't know. Marta, were you a beauty queen when you were 18 years old? You weren't? She wasn't. She says she wasn't. She wasn't a beauty queen. Podría serlo. She wasn't a beauty queen when she was 18 years old. Ask me if I was a good student when I was young. Young. Richard, yes. Were you a good student when you were young? I'm still young. Well, okay, when you were younger. Okay. Yes, normally I was a good student. I was a good student, normally. Not every year, but normally I was a good student when I was young. Aquí was dos veces. Era, cuando era. I was a good student when I was young. Ask me if Marta was a good student when she was young, when she was at school. Richard, yes. Was Marta a good student when she was at school? I don't know. I'll ask her. I'll ask her. Suena un poco al estilo Alaska. I'll ask her. Los británicos tienen Alaska. Suena Alaska. ¿Dónde está? Está en Alaska, but Alaska. Like Missouri. La señorita Uri. Missouri. When Mississippi asked Missouri Where is your New Jersey? She said, I don't know, Alaska. Alaska. I'll ask her, Marta, were you a good student when you were at school? You weren't. She says she wasn't. Well, you were or you weren't? Were you or weren't you? Come on. Give me a straight answer. Se dice en inglés, dame una respuesta recta. O sea, dame una respuesta correcta. Give me a straight answer. No des rodeos. Nada de rodeos. Give me a straight answer. Were you or weren't you? Were you or weren't you? Un británico diría, were you or weren't you? Were you or weren't you a good student? Okay. Yeah. Okay. She says she was a normal student. Neither excellent nor bad. In the middle. Yes, in the middle. A normal. Una del montón, ¿verdad? Bueno, no. Un poco mejor que el montón. So, she was not a bad student. She wasn't a bad student. All right. Were you a good student when you were at school? Were you? Were you? Where were you yesterday? Where was I yesterday? Okay, who was the Prime Minister of Spain in 1980? Let's see, Adolfo Suárez was the Prime Minister of Spain in... aquí se dice Presidente del Gobierno. Eso suena raro en inglés. President of the government. Es Primer Ministro. Okay, he was. Adolfo Suárez was the President of Spain in 1980. And who was the President of Spain? The Prime Minister. Who was the Prime Minister in 1983? Felipe González was the Prime Minister in 1983. Who was the Prime Minister in 1993? Felipe González was still the Prime Minister in 1993. And who was the Prime Minister in 1995? Felipe González was still the Prime Minister in 1995. And who was the Prime Minister in 1996? It depends. It depends. Yes, it depends. What does it depend on? Ahora, vamos a decirlo de forma natural. What does it depend on? What does it depend on? It depends on what part of the year. Part of the year of 1996, 24 years ago. Part of the year, Felipe González was the Prime Minister, and the other part of the other half of the year, José María Aznar was the Prime Minister. Oh. Who was the Prime Minister in 2005? In 2005, Mr. Zapatero, José Luis Zapatero was the Prime Minister in 2005. Who was the President of the United States in 1841? 1841. Well, it depends. What does it depend on? It depends on the time of the year. There were 3 presidents in 1841. 3 presidents? Yes. Yes. Martin Van Buren, único presidente con nombre holandés, apellido holandés, Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was the president of the United States for the first 3 until March 20th, the 3rd month of the year, the last part of his term. Then William Henry Harrison was the president starting on March 20th. 3 weeks later, he died of pneumonia. And then, what's his name? John Tyler. John Tyler was the president after the death of William Henry Harrison. Yes. William Henry Harrison, the inauguration speech outside in the cold weather, and he died. Moraleja, don't be careful with the weather if you become president of the United States. But who was the president of the United States in the year 1900? In the year 1900, the turn of the century. Yes. Who was the president at the turn of the century? The turn of what century? From the 19th century to the 20th century. Oh, William McKinley was the president. Oh. Who was the President of the United States during the Spanish-American War? During what? During the Spanish-American War. La Guerra de Cuba. Yes, we say Hispano-Americano, Spanish-American. I don't know. Well, ask me, who was the president during the Spanish-American War? William McKinley, the same man was the President of the United States during the Spanish-American War. And who was the President of Spain, or the Prime Minister of Spain? I don't remember. I think Sagasta was, but I'm not sure. I think Sagasta was the Prime Minister of Spain. Cánovas, no. Cánovas del Castillo was assassinated 1 year before, in 1897. So maybe Sagasta was the Prime Minister, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Who was the King or Queen of England during the Spanish-American War? 1898, Queen Victoria. Victoria was the Queen of England during the Spanish-American War. And who was the Queen of England in the First World War? No, the Queen, no, the King. Who was the King of England? I don't remember. George the Sixth? George the Fifth? I don't remember. Okay. Era un Jorge. It was George. I think it was George the Fifth. And who was the King of England during the American Revolution? The King of England during the American Revolution was George the Third. George the Third. Who was the King of Spain during the French Revolution? Well, the French Revolution was between 1789 and 1793 and 4. And the King of Spain during the French Revolution was Charles the Fourth. Fíjate como de Carlos el Cuarto, Charles the Fourth. Who was the King of Spain during the Spanish-American War in 1898? Well, it was the Regency, the mother of Alphonse XIII. It was during La Regencia, during the Regency. And who was the King of Spain? Who was the King of Spain during the First World War? The King of Spain during the First World War was Alphonse XIII. Okay. And who was the King of Spain during the 30 Years' War? La Guerra de los 30 Años. Yes, the 30 Years' War. When was the 30 Years' War? Well, the 30 Years' War was from 1618 to 1648. Wow, exactly 30 years? Almost exactly, yes. And who was the King of Spain? There were two. There were. Hubo dos. En inglés decimos hubieron dos, como los levantinos. There was one, there were two. During the first years, the King of Spain was Philip III, and then Philip IV. I think in 1623, I don't remember. I think Philip III was the King of Spain until 1623, but I'm not sure. And then Philip IV. Okay. Who was the King of Spain? Who was the King of Spain during the transition, the democratic transition? Juan Carlos I was the King of Spain during the transition. And when was the transition? Well, more or less, the transition was from late 1975 until 1982 or 1981. It depends. Late? ¿Qué es late? Late is tarde. Well, late means tarde. Llegas tarde. You're late. But late también means a finales de. Desde finales del 75, post muerte de Franco. from late 1975 to 1981, when Calvo Sotelo became Prime Minister. Was Calvo Sotelo Prime Minister for a long time? No, he was Prime Minister for 1 year, more or less. And who was the Prime Minister after Calvo Sotelo? The Prime Minister after Calvo Sotelo was Felipe González. And who was the Prime Minister before Calvo Sotelo? The Prime Minister before Calvo Sotelo was Adolfo Suárez. All right. So, from late 1975 to, from to. Cuando es un periodo de tiempo cerrado ya con principio y fin, nunca se dice since. From to. The 30 Years' War was from 1618 to, from to. Ahora bien, si partimos de una fecha hasta hoy inclusive y continúa, o sea, vigente aún, decimos since, escrito sin C, since. España es democracia formal con constitución desde el año 78. Spain has been, y se usa el presente perfecto, que no he enseñado, está por aquí. Spain has been a democracy since 1978. Spain has been a democracy for 42 years. For and since. All right. Franco was the head of state. Se dice cabeza de Estado para jefe de Estado. Franco was the head of state from 1939 to 1975. For 36 years. He was. How long was John Paul I, the Pope? The what? The Pope. El Papa. Yes, the Pope. Who? John Paul I. Now, John Paul I was the Pope for 1 month only. And who was the Pope after John Paul I? The Pope after John Paul I was John Paul II. Oh, where was he from? John Paul II. He was from Poland. He was from Krakow, Poland. Oh, good. And where was John Kennedy from? He was from Massachusetts. Where was George Washington from? He was from Virginia. Where was Thomas Jefferson from? He was from Virginia too. Where was Benjamin Franklin from? He was from Boston originally, but he was from Philadelphia. He moved to Philadelphia when he was 17. Richard, yes. How old were you? How old were you in 1992? In 1992, I was 40. In 1992, yeah, I was 40 in 1992. How old was Michael Johnson last year? Last year he was 13. How old will he be next year? Next year he'll be 15. So now he's 14. He's 14 now, which means he'll be 15 next year, and which means he was 13 last year. Which means, ¿eso qué es? Lo cual significa, lo cual quiere decir. Si tienes 14 años ahora, tiene 14 años ahora, lo cual significa que tendrá. He is 14, he's 14 now, which means, escrito means, which means he'll be 15 next year, and which means he was 13 last year. And how old is Denise Johnson? Well, now or next year or last year? Now. She's 11. Ah, so if she's 11, that means she'll be 12 last year, which means she was 10 years old last year. All right. Yes. Yes. And was she in Nebraska yesterday? I don't know. Probably. Inés. No, excuse me. Denise. Were you? Se lo pregunto. I'll ask her. I'll ask her. Se lo pregunto. En español se usa el presente. Se lo en inglés hay que usar el futuro. Se lo preguntaré. I'll ask her. I will. I'll ask her. Denise, where were you yesterday? Yeah? She says she was in Nebraska yesterday, in Lincoln. She was, I was, you were, they were you, was I, etc. See you tomorrow.